Hello, friends. Welcome to Tigers Radio Pod. I'm Rogelio Castillo. Alongside me is Yooper. Chris will be on shortly as he's taking care of some business, and I don't know what that business is. He just said he just texted me and said, I'm taking care of business. And so I think that has something to do with Harrison. But either way, I'm not sure. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartMedia, Stitcher, and Google Play. And, of course, at MotorCityBengals.com. Please subscribe to the Tiger Running Report channel as we just posted the Erie Seawolves recap. That took me a little longer than I expected because, quite frankly, I'll just be honest with everybody who's listening this evening. I started a new job about the last 2 weeks of November, and I'm drinking out of a fire hose. I have zero knowledge of Class A trucks. I'm working for in the trucking industry as a marketing manager, and every day I took in 41 classes. I've been beat, so I apologize for even a little bit of the scatterness of that video, but I wanted to do it, get it done and out there, and we had so many clips to go through. Yooper, one of the things that we did not do was we didn't label any of the clips at all. When you put them up on Twitter and there's a big library, there's no names for the clips. So we also have a Discord channel, which is just Tigers Talk, and we've gotten some really cool people in there. And I'll put that link in the description again. Thanks for everybody subscribing to that. And of course, I know there's no baseball going on, but we're still trying to keep up the conversation. In terms of Tigers Talk, we'll talk Lions football if you want, I guess, if you want to do that. Whatever the case is. I mean, the Pistons lost 12 in a row, but our guest this evening is Noah Yingling, who works for two fan-sided sites, Rox Pile and Call a Pen. We want to talk some Rockies because we've talked about the Rockies for quite a bit, it seems like, this season.
Yeah, we have. Whether it's, comparison of where the organizations are or trades or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we're really kind of using this.
Dead. This is the garbage you give me.
That's what a lot of fans feel like. A lot of the fans feel like that way. I'm sure Noah's got some stories about that. But before we get to anything else, Noah, welcome aboard. Thanks for coming on the pod. And we always ask our first-time guests this question. What is your earliest baseball memory?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. Second off, gotta love the Mad Dog Russo sound bites. Especially on hot stove when there's not a lockout on MLB Network. Matt Vasgersian playing his soundboard, and oftentimes Mad Dog Russo clips, just phenomenal. But my first baseball memory, I live in Ohio, and I'm about 2 hours or so away from Detroit, but closer to me is Cleveland. Grew up at the time, of course, they were named the Cleveland Indians. So I grew up as an Indians fan. My first recollection of a baseball memory is actually first off, I'm going to say here I'm fairly young. I'm 23, so it's a fairly new memory, but it involves Jim Thome. So it was either in his second to last year or his last year with the Indians. He was taking batting practice, and we were walking into the stadium, and the main entrance into what at the time was called Jacobs Field was in right center field.
Yep.
And he happened to be hitting, and he hit a ball over the center field wall. Well, over the center field wall in the stadium, and then it went onto the concourse, rolled right in front of me. Like, oh, that's interesting. So I got a ball. It wasn't my first game, but that's the first game I remember. And it's weird, too, because it was a batting practice ball in that it didn't have Bud Selig's signature or anything like that. It had the Chief Wahoo logo on it.
Really?
That was the only thing that was on it. Besides, just to the bottom left of the Chief Wahoo logo, there was a crack in the outside of the ball because Jim Thome hit it that hard. So I still have that ball today somewhere in my house here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I went to his when they made a trophy in front. They made like that trophy or not trophy, but the statue of him. Yeah. And I went there. It was against the Rangers, and that was my first time ever going to Progressive Field, and I came away pretty. The best memory about that was a buddy of mine it was my two buddies, and my buddy Ray is a huge Jim Thome fan, and we went down there, and we're just hanging out, and of course Nick Swisher comes up to the bat, and my buddy Dave goes very quietly, "Boo." Guy in front of us with his girlfriend turns around and just gives him a look like, and we just started laughing. We didn't think anything of it. He struck out. So then it was during the whole Bro Ohio thing, which I don't know how you feel about that. Thank you. I'm glad. So the second time he was at bat, I think he flied out or something. I forgot what happened. And Dave goes again, goes, "Boo." And the guy just stands up. And we're just like looking at him like, he didn't say anything else. That was just it. Boo. So sits back down. And then the last at bat does this. The guy, he strikes out the third bat. I remember this clearly. And Dave just goes, "Boo," like very slowly. Boo. And the guy turns around and his girlfriend says, "It's not worth it. It's not worth it. You remember what happened last time?"
Oh boy.
Yeah. And we're just like, okay.
The track record.
Yeah. But it was a very gorgeous stadium. I really like that stadium, comparatively speaking to some of the places I've been to, like Toronto. And but again, that was my Cleveland baseball memory. I don't know if I've ever shared that story before, but so it's actually there's plenty of baseball news to get to. Some of it news, some of it not news. And what's great about Noah is he does work for Call of the Pen, which our fan side said that covers all baseball. So it doesn't matter what it is, they cover it, and they do a really good job with that. So one of the things that came out today was the Carlos Correa offer of 10 years or 8 years. Was it 8 years, 275? Yooper?
Well, there's some conflict there. I think Olney was saying 10 years, 275. But of course, Corey Stavenhagen in The Athletic a couple of weeks ago said the Tigers offered 8 years, 270. So it's somewhere in there, depending on who you believe. The Stavenhagen number sounds more realistic to me. I mean, I can't imagine the Tigers offered him $27 million, knowing that that's going to, as amazing as this sounds, it seems like a lowball offer.
Yeah, and that's where, Noah, I'll ask you I'll start with you on that. To me, I think this is a non-story because he didn't sign, and I look at that as a thing where, okay, the news is out there. I know it's slow news. I get it. There's not blackout going on, but some of the fans, there's just, well, they should have offered more than $300 million, what have you. But I think Correa wants to be a $400 million player. That's just me. But is this a story to you? Because I think it's not. I think it's just something to put out there and people to talk about like we are now. But
yeah, to me, it's not really a story, especially because, as you said, he didn't sign. Now, that's one thing. If they, for example, if they offered him 10 years and $350 million and he didn't sign, okay, that's a story of, okay, he thinks he's worth more than that. Is he really worth more than that? Obviously, we'll see. But reportedly, he wants to get more than Francisco Lindor got from the Mets, and he got 10 years and $341 million.
Yeah.
So, personally, I think that since Correa's had some injury issues, he's not played a ton of full seasons. I wouldn't go that much for him, but if some team's desperate enough, I wouldn't be surprised. But for the Tigers too, especially since they have Baez now, I highly doubt they're going to, as Alavila said, spend like drunken sailors. So I don't think they're going to drop another $350 million on Correa.
And Yooper, I think you're in our Slack chat, or excuse me, in our Discord channel. Mm-hmm. I think one of our, I think it's Steve in there suggested maybe signing for maybe 2 years at $25 million per season or something like that. But I forgot somebody posted it in there. But I still don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I this whole notion of him, even like I said, he's going to get that fat contract. He's going to get paid. Even the market out there is still strong for him.
I think that, the Lindor contract definitely is kind of the water level he's looking to surpass. If the Tigers did make an offer, let's say Stavenhagen is right, and it was 8 years, 270 or thereabouts. That's about $34 million a year. That's pretty much what Lindor is making per year. That at least would be a competitive starting point. I just don't think that $27 million a year offer is even realistic. I'm very skeptical that was what was offered to him, if an offer was made. I guess what the person on Discord was saying, you look at what Semien did last year. He got the 1 year, $18 million. He parlayed that into a massive contract. I can't. Correa is going to find his deal. I don't think that's even an issue. Whether it's with New York or re-upping with Houston, someone's going to get him a very large number, and it probably will not be the Tigers.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I think it's just accepting the fact that the Tigers just got out and got a player that was in there and that fit the top 4 profile at least. And so, but speaking of shortstops, and here's where the 2021 season for the Rockies seems like just kind of I don't know how to describe it, but for Trevor Story out there was concerns about his arm strength. I guess he has lost some miles per hour on his throw. But what's really going on with him in terms of was there any truth of the Rockies even trying to? I guess they sent another offer to him, and before the whole trade deadline, or excuse me, the free agent frenzy went through.
They had some discussions with him, but they really didn't go far. But the thing is with the Rockies is that they really just messed up on a lot of things in general, and obviously it starts with Jeff Bridich, their former GM, and he. Pretty much everything he did not work out well. But, for example, John Gray, just before the lockout, he signed with Texas. And he had said numerous times, including to us on Rox Pile, he had said, hey, I want to stay here with the Rockies. Okay. So the Rockies, they didn't even put him on the trade market at the trade deadline. As odd as that sounds, there were still rumors about him and all that, but the Rockies did not put him on the trade market. They did not even field offers for him. But then they didn't even give him a ballpark area of what they were going to offer until the final homestand. And they offered him somewhere in the range of 3 years and 35 to 40 million. And he said no. So they could have offered him the qualifying offer. They did not. And then they really weren't in contact after that. And he signed with Texas. He's from Oklahoma, so Texas is closer for him. And he got 4 years and 56 million. With Story at the trade deadline, the Rockies tried to trade him, but they did not get what they thought they should have for him. And they essentially said the qualifying offer, the draft pick for it, would be more than they would get in a trade. Trevor Story was not happy, and he is a guy that is a very quiet guy, and that was really then. And then at the very end of the season, the post-game Zoom, he was crying and saying, I really wish these guys well. Ryan McMahon, Brendan Rodgers, his fellow infielders, essentially. But in July, he was pissed because he said, I actually like being here. I like playing with my teammates and all that. It's just they aren't going to get much in compensation because just the draft pick. So obviously, sometimes a draft pick ends up panning out because Trevor Story himself was a comp draft pick, which actually trivia on that. He was a comp pick for a pitcher who pitched obviously with the Rockies, but also pitched with the Tigers. Can either one of you guess who that pitcher was?
Oh boy. He pitched for the Rockies and the Tigers.
Yep.
Wow.
Wait, would that be Edwin Jackson?
No. Similar mindset though. If he bounced around to a lot of different teams.
Yooper, I think we know. Yooper, I think the answer is easier than what we think.
I'm sure it is.
Probably
I don't think it is.
All right, I'll give you guys.
Hotel.
Octavio Dotel? Really?
Yep.
Oh.
Relief
He
pitcher.
was
I was
the
relief pitcher.
Yeah.
Yeah, he pitched for the Rockies in just a handful of games. And at the time, they had the free agent Class B thing where if you had enough service time, you got a comp pick. So, yeah, he pitched a total of 8 games with the Rockies, 5 and a third innings, and they got a comp pick.
Yeah, didn't their GM at the time basically trade for him solely to get that pick?
Essentially, because the Rockies, well, first off, and this is Octavio Dotel territory, where the Rockies were his third team that year. He started the season out with the Pirates and then went to the Dodgers and then went to the Rockies. But the Rockies were, they were around 500 or so, but they, like I said, he pitched in 8 games. He wasn't even eligible for the postseason. So even if they got to the postseason, he wouldn't have been able to pitch. But they got a pick out of him. They got Trevor Story. So,
worked out well.
Ended up paying off.
Wow. Just because I remember that was the Tigers were his final team. He pitched 2 seasons, and then the second season he blew out his arm, and that was it for the hotel. I'm pretty sure that's how he ended his career here in Detroit, but I would never, you're right, I would never got that. I totally forgot about that.
That old way, it used to be easy to accrue a lot of picks that way. The Rays did that one year. I remember they ended up with like 12 or 13 picks in the first 3 rounds.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And I remember one year, Felipe Lopez, somebody traded for him with like 6 games to go in the season just to get that pick out of it. So that was quite the system they got rid of.
I know Tampa, too, they had a draft pick they got from former Rocky Brad Hopp, and they ended up drafting Blake Snell with that pick.
There's a way to leverage those things, no question.
And speaking of leveraging, you have the interim now GM, Bill Schmidt, who's been with the Rockies since about 1999, where he came over from Cleveland. And you look at his, he was a scouting director, he was a farm director for about 11 seasons. And in those 11 seasons, the Rockies went to the World Series, went to the ALDS. So there's quite a bit of pedigree there in terms of prospect wise. But is there going to be a different, compared to speaking to O'Dowd and their last general manager, and Jeff Bridich, is he going to focus on rebuilding the system, or what do you think, Noah, that he's going to have to start? I mean, outside, of course, the farm system is a mess, but then you have the reputation now that some of the free agent or some of the letting these pitchers go to free agency. Where can you go from here, really?
Oh, really? The main thing that they have to look for in free agency or drafting is especially with pitchers, you have to find ground ball pitchers. Those are the pitchers that do well at Coors Field. In fact, most people, especially for the different series, you'd hear, like I traveled some with the team this year, and I would talk to some of the beat writers of the teams. They'd be like, how in the world how are the Rockies starting pitchers? How are they doing better at Coors Field than on the road? Like, it's because they're ground ball pitchers. That's why. Herman Marquez, Antonio Senzatella, John Gray, they were all top 20 in ground ball rates. And all of them had an ERA of at least 1 run fewer at Coors Field.
Wow.
And also, too, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, pitchers from Colorado or Utah, places of elevation, they pitch better at Coors Field as well because they're used to it. For example, arguably the Rockies' best reliever this year was a guy by the name of Lucas Gilbreth. And I'll be totally honest with you, going into the season, hadn't even heard of him. Part of it was because the 2020 season, obviously, there was no minor league season, but he didn't pitch. He never pitched a game in AAA or AA before getting to the majors. He struggled in his first 5-6 games or so, but for the rest of the season, he had an ERA of like 2.5. But he's a Colorado native. He's from Denver. So he...
That sense, yeah.
And if you look at his splits, on the road, he had an ERA of, I think, 4.5 or so. Yeah, 4.43. At Coors Field, it was 2.42. So his ERA was essentially half at Coors Field.
I mean, to me, it's I like Herman a lot. Marquez, because that's a guy who I think would be perfect and trade for the Tigers, but because he's kind of a workhorse, he's been out there. But as far as young pitching talent coming up the pipeline, how does it look for Colorado? Because it just seems like they're able to they've been getting better about getting their own prospects. Like Gray comes to mind. I often think of Jeff Francis for some strange reason I do, but that's the one I associate the most. But it's come a long way since trying to fill the void of free agent pitchers like the Mike Hamilton. I always pick up the Mike Hampton deal, which was one of the worst deals of all time.
Yep.
And Denny Nagel.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about Danny Nagel. Oh, yeah. I forgot about Kyle too. Those are. Wow, I forgot about Nagel, man. How was it? Did he come over from Atlanta, right? Yooper?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, because he was part of the Braves playoff rotation. But as far as an emphasis on pitching, what Bill Schmidt's going to do, is that going to be a point of reference, or are they going to go with trying to get? Right now, it just seems like there's so many holes to fill right now at the moment.
Yeah, there is, and that's one thing that publicly and privately the Rockies won't tell you. They think that they are very close to a playoff team, and that's why you always see GM comments of, I have no idea what in the hell the Rockies are doing, but that's the Rockies for you. Exactly. So yeah, that's the thing where personally, I think that they are a little bit further along than most people would say, and that's given by the record. I mean, they were a 74-win team in 2021, and most people thought they'd be somewhere in the low to mid 60s. I thought they would be high 60s, low 70s, and ended up winning 74. But the thing is if you're losing Story, if you're losing John Gray, I mean, those are two of your big pieces right there. So if you plan on getting better, you have to essentially replace them and add even more, because they've had a lot of guys who just haven't developed. For example,
I was going to ask, what's the shorthand on Brendan Rodgers? What happened there?
Part of it with him was injuries, and he just had he had a ton of different injuries. And in 2020, he had 2 or 3 different injuries, so he only played 7 games or so. And then he started out the 2021 season on the injured list as well. He didn't play his first game until roughly Memorial Day. But after that, he ended up playing well. He ended up hitting 284, 285, somewhere around there, and had an 800 OPS. So he ended up essentially proving himself. But the thing for the Rockies, too, is they have so many guys that are versatile, where they can play 3 or 4 different positions. Rodgers is included in that. But he was drafted as a shortstop. Right. And really, the Rockies don't want him to play shortstop. They want him to stay at second base. But the problem is, if you don't have Trevor Story, who's going to play shortstop? They have Ryan McMahon at third base. He can also play second base. He's actually a better defender at second base, but he's still a really good defender at third base. And they're thinking about moving him to shortstop, where he's never played before.
Musical chair.
Yeah. So I kind of wonder then at that point, then you have to look at you go down the farm system in terms of infield depth right now. You do have the likes of, so the impressive debut of Zach Veen this year, but he's still 2 or 3 years away. He was in low A. And then in terms of pitching, I'm always fascinated by left-handers. It's something I've always been admiring, is Ryan Wilson, who was down in AAA Albuquerque. And he was a 2018 first-round draft pick. Are fans wondering when he's going to come up and make an impact? Because it seems like he didn't really adjust well in AAA.
Part of it was, again, he had injuries too in 2021. Right. He had appendicitis. So he was out for probably 2 months, I believe, or so with that. But yeah, he did not transition well there. And that's why the Rockies, they privately and somewhat publicly said, hey, we don't have a ton of talent right now in AAA or AA, but it's in high A and low A, and the records show that. Where Albuquerque and Double A Hartford, they were not good teams, but Spokane and Fresno, their high A and low A teams, made it to the playoffs. But the thing is that the Rockies, their starting rotation was decent, especially at Coors Field, but they had no depth. So their sixth starter was Chi Gonzalez, who is a guy that on a good team is probably the fifth starter in AAA. He shouldn't be a fifth starter at the major league level. I mean, he has a career 84 ERA plus, but the Rockies had multiple injuries in the rotation in early September. So they decided, okay, we're going to completely supersede our AAA pitching staff. Rollison was down there. He was already back, but he only had a few games. Peter Lambert, who pitched with the team in 2019, but he was just rehabbing from Tommy John surgery. He ended up coming back at the last few games of the season. But the rest of the rotation, they're like, we don't want to call him up to the majors. So they went down to Double A, called up a guy who was a 2018 draft pick in Ryan Feltner. And he ended up making 2 starts and he got bombed in them. But that shows you right there of, okay, we have 5-6 starters in AAA. We aren't going to go with any of them. We're going to go to our AA guy that we have to add to the 40-man roster. And mind you, he's playing in Reading, Pennsylvania. And 24 hours later, he has to be at Coors Field in Denver.
Yeah, I was going to say, even with, I never understood what happened with the Colorado Sky Sox situation. I know it's now because I think it was stadium size had something to do with them not sticking around AAA, but I always thought that was strange that they were bouncing around affiliates so much. You talk about third base earlier. Montero, who was one of the prospects that came over in the Nolan Arenado trade. How's his progress doing? Is somebody? I mean, I know his strikeouts were a little high, but is he going to be around the corner soon?
I would expect him to make his MLB debut this year, but the thing is for him is, like with most of the Rockies, they have to find a position. What position are they going to play him at? Because third base, if Ryan Mcmahon is at third base, there probably is not a spot for him there. But his secondary spot is first base, where they just re-signed CJ Cron to a 2-year deal. Of course, Cron being the former Tiger. But that's the thing. Okay, so if you move McMahon over to short, then Montero has an opening there. But is he going to be the Rockies really, they need a 30-homer, 100 RBI bat in their lineup. Is he going to be that at the beginning of the season? Probably not. So that's the thing where they have to determine where. And Rockies owner Dick Monfort said this at the press conference for the Nolan Arenado trade. He said a lot of these guys need to show themselves, and if they don't, then we need to cut bait with them. The problem is at least so far, they haven't shown themselves, and they haven't cut bait with them. Because the Rockies need an outfielder as well. They have a ton of outfielders. It's just Charlie Blackmon's really the only MLB quality one right now.
Yeah, it seems like I don't know, Yooper. We've talked about their outfield before too. It just seems like it's a series of guys a little bit out of position, at least in my opinion.
Yeah,
and it's just you look down. Okay, so what about like the Betty Montgomery who was just drafted this year? That's gonna take some time. And yeah, you're right. And to emphasize that, it's the knowing that they have some good potential players up on the way. But what do you do now? You sign a bunch of minor league free agents. And in terms of trade options, I think to me at least, I don't know about you, Noah, but I think they're trading a starting pitching to get an outfielder that's capable. And really, by the way, CJ Cron, one of the Tigers said resign him. To this day, I'm still kind of mystified why they didn't resign him. He would have came back. I think he would have came back to Detroit. But for whatever reason, I mean, they put Scope at first and with Cabrera, which was okay, and that was a good experiment that didn't fail too badly. But either way, do you think they're gonna? The last question before we moved on to the 1995 Rockies, do you think that Colorado's going to have to trade somebody to get an outfielder at this point?
I think they will, or if they don't trade one, they at least should sign one on the free agent market. I say should because we all know that last offseason, for example, they were like, okay, we need to address these 5 different things, and okay, we're going to trade Nolan Arenado. That's it. That's all we're going to do. Okay, that's not fixing anything. So they should sign or trade for an outfielder. But the main thing that I've been hearing of the person they're willing to trade is one of their outfielders, Raimel Tapia. And Tapia, he's not going to get much in a trade return because on a good team, he's a 4th or 5th outfielder. And it's because, I mean, he'll hit for a decent average and he has speed, but he is a ground ball machine. I mean, in 2021, he had the number 1 ground ball rate in baseball by 5 or 10%. He had a ground ball rate, it was 65, 70%. That's how, I mean, as we all know, fielders aren't on the ground. They're on the ground, they aren't in the air. So if you hit a ball on the ground, there's more chance that a fielder is going to get it. So that's the whole idea behind launch angle, and he's the exact opposite of it, where unless he lays down a drag bunt, he doesn't get on a ton, and he doesn't walk a ton either. So if he was at the top of the Rockies lineup, and he, for example, in 2019, he played in 138 games, and he had a sub 310 on base percentage. There's a problem right there.
Yeah, it is. Noah, answer me this. And it might be a long question, but I'll try to condense it a bit. The Rockies won 74 games. The Tigers this year won 77 games, and a lot of fans here believe they made some real strides. And, they're on the step of making another step forward next year in their eyes. Do you believe the Rockies' 74 wins was, quote unquote, real? Was there any mirage to it? Or are they a 74-win team looking to take the next step? And can they take that next step in that loaded division? And because the one nice thing is MLB might be adding playoff spots. So that gives everybody a little bit of hope. But I just wonder where you see the next 12 to 18 months for the Rockies.
I think right now, I think the 74-win team was real. But with losing Story and Gray, I mean, they're probably a mid-60s win team right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing where if you really think they're going to be moving forward, then something has to happen. You can't be relying on, for example, Garrett Hampson. He's almost a little bit similar to Tapia in that he has great speed. He cannot hit, though, and he does not get on base much at all. He has an OPS plus of, I believe, 70 in his career. But Hampson, he can play center. He can play all 3 outfield spots. He can play second, short, third. He can play all over. It's just the Rockies right now, if they don't make a move, they're starting shortstop. If they don't sign anybody, trade for anybody, or move McMahon over to shortstop, that's a problem. Because Trevor Story down to Garrett Hampson, that's not an upgrade, and it's not even maintaining. So that's the thing where, and who knows, if we get the DH in the National League, the Rockies have to find another hitter.
Oh, yeah.
They don't, believe it or not, and this Rockies fans know this by now, but a lot of the baseball world doesn't. The Rockies are not a good hitting team. You would think playing at Coors Field and playing at elevation, they would be a good hitting team. They are not close to a good hitting team. Part of it is because, and they really started noticing it this year, where there's a big change between mile high and sea level. And with recovery for injuries and just the way the ball moves and a bunch of different things. So, like, especially at the beginning of the year, you look at their first 1 or 2 games of a road trip, they were shut out almost every single time. by July or August, they already had, I believe they were shut out 12 times, which was, I believe, tied for an MLB record.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Now that you say that, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about that controversy that erupted about different baseballs being used in different markets. And that some of the lesser teams got the dead baseballs.
Yeah.
Do you think the Rockies were getting dead baseballs?
They might be. I mean, in theory, you don't need a dead baseball at Coors Field if you're sitting in an office in New York.
Yeah,
that they're okay. The ball's going to fly out of there anyways, and they aren't a good team, so we'll give them a dead baseball instead of let's give the Yankees a live baseball. And that's one of the things with Coors Field, especially if you look at some of the home run numbers, because Coors Field is so big, and you look at, like, for example, Yankee Stadium, where Yankee Stadium's a bandbox, so Joey Gallo, for example, will hit 10 more homers at Yankee Stadium than compared to Coors Field. Now, you probably hit some more doubles and more triples, but home runs, I mean, you have to hit it a little bit farther, because center field it's like at Comerica. Center field is far away.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that too, about the dimensions at Comerica Park and then the juice balls. There was a good article posted at Yanks Go Yard about Anthony Rizzo talking about how MLB uses the juiced balls for the Field of Dreams game. And they're talking about some of how even hitting in Comerica Park could change too. There's been, on the same podcast, actually, we're talking about the Tigers might be moving in right center. And so the dimensions have never been favorable, but yeah, the offensive numbers in Detroit were, although we like to believe that some of the fly balls could have been home runs because based off the dead ball, but it's still screwed up. But we have one question we got to get to that was, I think, rather amusing, and we'll end with the 1995 Rockies. By the way, Chris is not joining us this evening. He said, sorry guys, I can't make it. So this is if we're talking about Cal Ripken like streaks, Chris has never missed a show. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He has missed, this is his first show he's missed in 2 years, I think, something like that. I thought he never missed a show, that I just realized what show he missed. But anyway, the one question we had from the audience this evening was, and what are our favorite listeners, Deadly Ninja Bees at Deadly_Bees on Twitter, who in baseball is on your Christmas lists? We have to give Jerry Reinsdorf something this year, right? As far as what I want, simply put, I would just like baseball to resume, and that's it. I don't want anything else for Christmas. Love baseball to resume, and the Tigers signing their players and getting that done, or even another minor league arm or something. But just give me baseball back. That's all I want. Yooper, what about you?
I would like to see the DH get into the National League. I think it's beyond time just to get everybody playing the same rule set. So if off top of my head here, I'd go there.
And as far as the question, who in baseball is my Christmas list, I would give AJ Hinch a box of cigars to answer the question fully. Yes, I give him a box of cigars, and maybe, what is it? I'm trying to think of one of those Omaha boxes of Omaha steaks.
Omaha steaks.
Yeah, it seems like something cheesy to do, just like bring a box of steaks. He might be a vegetarian for all I know. I don't know. No, what about you? Who are you going to give gift to, and what do you want for Christmas?
I won't give it to the Colorado Rockies. I'll give it to the Colorado Rockies fans, a team that has some semblance of a playoff. It could be playing in the playoffs in 2022. The thing is that it takes a lot of presence to get that done.
All right. Well, it's going to take some time for a lot of Tiger fans too. If a lot of them were upset, visibly upset, and were just complaining about it on social media not getting Korea. But I think that's a little bit over with now, as we discover more about Diaz. So the 1995 Rockies. The reason why this team I want to talk about was the first Rockies team that entered the postseason. This is only their third year in existence, and this is coming off a season where they were the West back then wasn't what it is now.
Right.
And this is a team that was in third place before the strike was over. And Don Baylor, God bless his soul, or rest in peace, Don. He passed away, right?
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Don Baylor, who did a really good job with this team. It's the first time they got to the postseason. They lose to the Braves 3-1. And this is the collection of players on his team was, for Tiger fans, the Tigers are somehow always related, somehow have a tie with the Rockies. For example, Bruce Ruffin, who was a reliever on that team, his son was drafted by the Tigers. Is it Chance Ruffin? Chris?
Yeah.
Or Yooper? Yeah. So he was drafted by the Tigers. So then Kevin Ritz, who was on that rotation for the team and led the team in wins with 11, was originally a Tiger, and he was picked up in the expansion draft. So again, that was one. The only starter I remember outside of Ritz was Armando Reynoso, who was, I think, one of the first Rockies to be an all-star team. Does that sound right? Or
possible?
Yep, I remember that. And then, of course, one of my favorite closers at the time. I was really obsessed with this guy because he had Darren Holmes. Do you guys remember Darren Holmes?
Yep.
Is he a lefty?
He was a righty. His side armor. He was like that side armor that just.
Oh, okay.
He was really, really good too in terms of just in terms of numbers that stand out a little bit. He had 14 saves, but it was just, I don't know. I always liked this wino because it just came from the bottom. But I don't know. There's Omar Olivares too, who did pitch for the Rockies on there. Another former Tiger. Fun fact too. Did you know, Yooper, that Brett Saberhagen and AJ Sager also pitched for the Rockies that season?
Yeah, I did look that up. That was interesting. Saberhagen was jumping around a little bit at the end of his career there.
And this is, of course, you have the Larry Walker, who's now in the Hall of Fame. No, in terms of players on that team that are kind of, in terms of standing out now, you have Walt Weiss, who ended up being a manager at some point, and Dante Bichette, his son, of course. But does people remember this team fondly at all, or is this kind of one of those things that it was just the beginning of something better coming down the line?
People, especially the Rockies people, they love this team. Part of it is there was the first year that Coors Field was being used, because the first 2 seasons they used Mile High Stadium, which is where the Broncos play. So the Rockies, they had a good offense, and of course the old adage at the time, of course it's not now since the Rockies offense stinks, but the old adage at the time was you just know they're going to hit because of the elevation. And they had a lot of guys that, especially if you don't look at OPS plus, for some of them, mainly because the on-base percentage, but they were called the Blake Street Bombers because Coors Field is on the corner of 20th and Blake in Denver. And they had Andres Galarraga, Vinny Castilla, Dante Bichette, which, especially for Bichette, if you look at some of his OPS plus numbers, you look at his WAR numbers, absolutely mind-boggling because they're so bad, especially on WAR. You would think, for example, when he was with the Rockies in 1999, he had 34 homers and 133 RBI, hit 298, 354, 541, and he had a WAR that was negative 2.3. That's how bad he was defensively.
Wow.
I mean, that takes some serious talent to be that bad defensively. Have a negative 2.3 WAR after you've hit 34 homers and 133 RBI. That OPS plus, by the way, was only 102.
Wow.
He hit 300 with an 895 OPS, and it was a 102 OPS plus. But that's the steroid era at elevation in 1999, which was even worse because that was right after expansion, where pitching was so
watered down. Yeah.
I mean, Pedro Martinez won the Cy Young Award in the American League that year, and he had, I believe, a 1.74 ERA. His ERA was 1/3 of the American League average that year. 1/3.
Yeah. My favorite, Vinny Castilla on that team. Good player for the Rockies, right? He's fairly productive, as a lot of guys were. He went to Tampa, I believe, right after he left Colorado. and obviously his offensive numbers went down, and Tampa fans weren't, such as they weren't happy. His nickname there was Vinny Cash Steela.
Yep.
Get it? Vinny Cash Steela, because he was stealing all the money that the Rays gave him. So to hit him, he did not hit well there. So I think he was one of the first that kind of gave ex-Rockies the reputation that if you get him out of Coors, that it's a big problem.
Yeah, and I actually talked to him a few years ago about going to Tampa because he was actually traded from the Rockies to Tampa, and he was not happy about it because he said, I just bought a house in Denver. I had my kids there and all that. And he still lives in Denver because he actually still works with the Rockies. He's a special assistant to Bill Schmidt, the GM. So he said, yeah, I just got everything settled in Denver, and then I get traded. And then he said, on top of it, I get traded to Tampa, where, of course, they weren't a good team at the time.
Right.
And he said, I was injured all the time in Tampa because he credited it to the turf. He said it was awful on my knees. So I had knee issues all the time. So I never played. So because in 2000, his first year there, he only played 85 games. And they traded him in 2001 to Houston. But in 2001 with the Rays, or at the time Devil Rays, he played 24 games. He had an OPS plus of 56. So yeah, he was not good there. And then he moved on to Atlanta. He came back to Colorado in 2004, left, and then he came back a third time to end his career in 2006 with the Rockies.
Yeah, because Steele reminds me of what happened to Andre Dawson, because the reason why he couldn't play in Montreal anymore because the artificial turf was so bad out there, and a lot of players' careers were totally changed because of that. And so, yeah, the whole idea of playing carpet, even I think Scott Rowland too had a problem with that when he was in Toronto. So one of my favorite Rockies was Eric Young, EY, because he seemed like he was the last of high base stealing. We don't see the 70 steals, 60 steals anymore, and I felt like he was the last basket of that a little bit, because lead the league in steals with 53 in 1996 seems a little, for any old school fan, like, 53 is not much compared to what Vince Coleman or Ricky Henderson were doing. But I felt that with the doubles and stolen bases and and also pretty impressive slash line in 1990, his all-star season, 324, 393, and he had his first couple seasons in Colorado, OPS over 800. Can't ask for any more than that. And I think that out of all the players that were in that period of time for Colorado, I really thought that out of all the in terms of talent that was on that team, his hustle and everything, he stood out to me more than on that 95 squad.
Yeah, and I actually spoke with him this year because I made a trip out to Coors Field, and the Braves just happened to be playing. Of course, the eventual World Series winning Braves. And Walt Weiss and Eric Young are both on their coaching staff. Walt Weiss, their bench coach, Eric Young, their first base coach. And it was that week when Larry Walker was inducted into the Hall of Fame, or made his speech. So we were talking about the 95 team, Larry Walker, just his time in Colorado in general. And he was saying how, especially with playing with Larry Walker, he was like, yeah, with him playing behind me, he made all of us better. Because he said there'd be times where we'd be dragging or whatever, especially because the time they really didn't know between going from altitude to sea level. And he said, yeah, part of it was probably that, but we didn't know what it was at the time. But he would just essentially raise all of us up. And part of it is because he was a great defender. He was obviously a great hitter. And then in 97, he won the NL MVP. But yeah, for Eric Young, he was weird in that he was kind of the end of the era, like you said, with stolen bases, but he was also kind of the beginning of the era of the super utility guy, because especially like at the beginning of his career with the Rockies, they didn't really know where to play him. They played him at second, they played him in left, they played him in center. believe he got a few games in right field, and then I know later in his career when he started bouncing around some, he played all over the place. But yeah, so he was kind of one of those in between guys where he was kind of at the end of an era, but also kind of at the beginning of an era. And by the way, too, with Eric Young, he said he played 15 years in the major leagues. He said there's 2 players that I can say. I asked him the best hitter that he's ever seen, and he said that he would put Larry Walker in. He would have a 1 and 1A. Larry Walker and Barry Bonds.
Wow.
Because he played with Bonds for a handful of games in 2003. But yeah, he said the best that I've ever played with, Larry Walker and Barry Bonds.
I can totally believe that, especially because I know people give Bonds, well, and rightfully so with the whole steroid thing, but before his numbers, there's an article this week come out whether his numbers were made, the numbers before he PEDs made him a Hall of Famer, and I still think that they did. Barry Bonds was such a complete player, and again, when he took steroids, was it late 90s? Yooper, was that speculated on?
Yeah, it was just after the Sosa McGuire race, and
that's right.
The story is he wanted to be in that same conversation.
Yeah, because he also want to get paid more, and so the whole, I don't know. Even though when I see the Hall of Fame ballots where there's nobody voting, I still don't understand that logic whatsoever. Because I feel like and that again, Chris, we've talked about this too with Chris, how the whole Hall of Fame debate sometimes is a giant waste of time because it's just constantly going back and forth, going over the little stuff like that, minutia, and really it's just, I don't know. But either way, that's really about it. And that was in terms of questions. But Noah, what do you want to plug? What do you have going on and call to the pen and Rox Pile? Which, by the way, I love. That's one of my favorite names, all the fan-sided sites. And I saw a link, by the way, for fan-sided merch. There's no Motor City Bengals stuff. There's
no Rox Pile stuff either.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and then the other side I noticed was no Rox Pile. What the hell? That's a good logo too.
And the thing is, there was a site that it's been dormant for 2 or 3 years at least. It was called Mile High Maniac. It was Denver sports in general, and they have stuff still on there, but not Rox Pile. But do you guys know the story of why it's called Rox Pile though?
No, I do not know. What's the story?
So, have either one of you been to Coors Field before?
No, it's on my bucket list. Actually, okay. I think we're actually, my wife and I were talking about going later or this year coming up. But go ahead.
So in center field, there's an area of bleachers, and it's considering how big Coors Field is. I mean, especially if you're like in the press box or by home plate, it looks like it's out in Timbuktu. But it's just set of bleachers out there, and it's called the Rock Pile. So similar, Rox Pile, Rock Pile. And in Mile High Stadium, they had a similar area. In Mile High Stadium, those tickets, the 2 years they were there, they were $1. And when the Rockies first started at Coors Field, it was, I think, $2, and then they started bumping it up, and I'm not sure quite what it is now. Last I knew, it was like $5, but that was essentially the cheap way for fans to get in. You're sitting out in the middle of nowhere, but hey, you get into a major league stadium for $5. So you get to sit in the bleachers out in the Rock Pile.
Oh, so we did get a question here real quick from Troy, who's watching us on YouTube. Thanks for the question, Troy. Will Torque and Green be on the Tigers this season? And I think I personally want to say that I think Green might start the season with the Tigers personally, based off the outfield depth situation. As far as Turkelson goes, I think he might be a midseason call-up, or maybe even earlier than that. Oh, Walter makes a good comparison here. Reminds me of the Price old bleacher seats. Yeah, when I was a safety for my school, we got to go to games for free, but every once in a while, I remember, I think it was like my first game with the Tiger Stadium, my father and my older brother in 87. Wow. Meanwhile, no one was even born. I was going to say, every time I say something like that, I'm like, man, anyway, but yeah, we got bleacher seats like that. But yeah, as far as getting back to the question though, I think first Torque might. It really depends on how it goes in spring training, but I don't. Sorry, Yooper. Keep Chris throwing up, but Yooper. I mean, do they both start on opening day? I just see one. That's just me.
Well, again, to not make it too complicated, but if they change the service time stuff, then I think there's a better chance they're both on the roster. If they eliminate a service time manipulation, if any of that is still there in any way, shape, or form, then I wouldn't put either one of them on the opening day roster. I would play that game and bring them up 2 weeks later. But the shortest answer to his question, will they be on the roster this year? Yes, at some point. Yeah. If they're not, something's gone terribly wrong, right? I mean, the whole plan of this team coming together, a big part of it is predicated on those two guys, and they got to get started sometime. And now is the time. I think you're right. I think if I was going to put my own money on it, Green for opening day, Torkelson maybe more around Memorial Day. That would seem like a decent timeline if Green has a good spring.
Yeah, I mean, again, one of the things that you forget that Torque moved up 3 levels last year in his first season. That's kind of rather unheard of. And even after that first month where he struggled, where we just some fans, I mean, even myself when I first saw him, I was just like, "What am I missing something?" Yes, clearly, we just needed time for adjusting. Did he ever adjust? And so the amount of home runs he hit, but just also he was trying to go to right field and take what was given to him and hit it. And so he was making adjustments every time he was going up to the plate. And defensively, I thought he did a really good job at first base and held his own at third. But hopefully first base is his position.
When I saw him play here in Des Moines, I was really impressed with his opposite field power. He was looking to go the other way, but he was not looking to poke singles. He was looking to drive that ball. It was really an impressive display of hitting those 3 days that I saw him. And again, that's a small sample, but I look forward to seeing more of that.
Yeah, for sure. So Noah, before you get out of here, tell your fans or minor league fans. Oh, by the way, Matt Noakes was on that 95 squad. It's another bloop but give us one prospect that you're excited for next year before we get out of here.
Before I do that, though, I do want to correct myself on the Rox Pile. It's actually $4. Currently $4.
Oh,
nice.
If you buy them day of. And also, too, if you want to bring kids are $1 out there. If you buy them the day of. So yeah, still cheap. That's one of the few cheap things out there. So for the Rockies in top prospects, especially for guys making their debut this year, I would look at probably Ryan Rollison, because the Rockies do have to replace John Gray in the rotation somehow. And it's either going to be him or Peter Lambert, who I mentioned earlier. He was recovering from Tommy John surgery, and he just came back at the very end of the season. But the thing is with Rollison is like I said, he did struggle some at AAA. So even though the starting rotation is their strength, they do have an opening there at the back end. And also, too, their depth is not great. Like I said earlier with Chi Gonzalez. For example, on the Dodgers, he's a 5th starter in AAA Oklahoma City for them. For the Rockies, he was their 5th starter / long reliever. That's the problem. For the rest of their prospects, though, I wouldn't be surprised if Montero made his debut this year. Ryan Villade, who here's another one where he can play a few different positions, because Ryan Villade is their number 5 prospect. He made his debut in September, and he was a shortstop, and then they moved him to the outfield. He had never played the outfield before, but they moved him to the outfield. Why? Great question. But the Rockies, as you said earlier, that they kind of like to sometimes put square pegs in round holes, where they're just guys out of position. You look at for example, their playoff teams in 2017 and 2018. You had Ian Desmond playing left or center field he was playing first base after he played left and center field for Texas for a season. And before that, he played shortstop. So essentially, they had a shortstop playing first base or left or center field.
Wow.
They had Tony Walters as their main catcher, and he was developed as a shortstop by Cleveland, and then he switched over to catching. They had who else? They had Ryan McMahon when Arenado was on the team. They had Ryan McMahon, who was a third baseman. They had him playing second and first base. So they just had a lot of guys. Oh, Gerardo Parra was another one. Left fielder, right fielder. Let's have him play first base. So yeah, they just had a lot of guys that were out of position. Garrett Hampson, I mentioned earlier, he's another one. Drafted as a shortstop. Let's play him at second, and let's play him in center field. So it hasn't really worked out well for them. Another one I can think of, Daniel Murphy, second baseman. Okay, let's plug him in at first. Didn't work out well. They've done that a lot with first base of, this guy's a good athlete. We'll put him over at first. He can catch a ball. It's more than playing first base than just catching a ball from the third baseman. Everyone
can't be the great Todd Helton. I mean, that's what they've been doing, searching for.
And really, that's been their problem. Other than Justin Morneau, who came in for a year and a half or so right after Helton, they haven't had a first baseman. Now they have found one with CJ Crone because he was their best hitter last year.
Yeah, don't remind me about that.
But now it's okay. Can we find somebody else that can help offensively? As I mentioned him a lot, Ryan McMahon. The very beginning of the year, we were talking about him as a home run derby candidate because he was on pace for 40 homers and 100 RBI. And then after June 15th, his power numbers just absolutely went through the toilet, but his on-base numbers went up. From opening day to June 15th, his on-base rate was like 305, something like that, but he was on pace for 40 homers. After that, he was on pace for 13 homers, but his on-base was like 350. So which one do they get? They need the power bat, but they'll take the on-base bat if he is that guy. But the Rockies are a team with a lot of wild cards, and sometimes a lot of wild cards are not great.
Speaking of wild cards to end the podcast, so we did get a couple of quick questions there from Troy and Walter Briggs in the YouTube. First of all, is Troy and his question: what free agents might the Tigers still be interested in? Yooper, I'll let you start this real quick before we get out of here.
Well, I'd like to see them add some bullpen depth. We've talked about it before. Colin McHugh would be a great one to add. I mean, he's been a pretty steady force last couple of years. Should probably have another year or two left. And there are plenty of interesting relievers of various ilk that you could go and get. And yeah, the Tigers need some power. If they can find the power bat for the outfield, they certainly have the payroll flexibility to spend some more money. It's going to be real interesting depending how long the lockout ends. And it's going to be interesting for the Rockies, for that matter, and the Tigers, teams that are looking to take that next step. If the lockout goes a while, but they still want to start the season relatively close to on time, there's going to be a real mad dash to sign what's left of the free agent market. So there should be some opportunities for teams to get some bargains and get some players who are desperate for gigs. So if the Tigers have that need, if bullpen and outfield, that would be great. And I'm sure the Rockies, you could tick off a quick list of maybe guys they could target and jump in and get at the last minute.
Personally, I still think the Tigers will need another infielder to complement an outfielder as well. We talked about outfield power bat for sure. The reason why I think they get it like perhaps somebody on a minor league deal is for essentially just in case something happens with Cabrera, his age, what have you. And I like the idea of a dedicated second baseman to play when Scope is playing first. So maybe something like that effect. As far as bullpen help, I'm with you, Yooper. I think what they still need to do is address the fifth starter. And there's some names out there. Carlos Rodon, who I know that Chris has mentioned 2 years, maybe a 2-year deal would be good. I still like Tyler Anderson, which was an idea that from our Discord channel. That is Michael Padilla, who somebody brought up last week. I thought that was a really good one too. You have like reclamation projects, like maybe like Danny Duffy, who I think it was injured towards the end of the season. So, I mean, it gets a little gray after that, honestly, in terms of who's out there for the fifth spot. Is Chi Gonzalez? He's not re-signing with Colorado, is he?
I believe he's a free agent right now. He was non-tendered by them after the 2020 season, but then they re-signed him, and then they designated him for assignment at the end of 2021. I don't believe he's re-signed with them. I wouldn't be surprised if he does, but I don't think he has not officially signed yet with the Rockies, at least.
So the options out there are kind of slim. Even a guy like a reclamation project, like who comes to mind, who's in AAA and maybe given a minor league opportunity is Jaciel de la Cruz, who's a righty that was in the Atlanta system. As far as Ken Kershaw or Jansen from the Dodgers, I don't know. I don't think those chances are. I mean, as far as Jansen's concerned, I still think he has a lot of mileage on him as a reliever. I mean, he did a lot of two inning saves. So, and the last question was, can we bounce back from Willie Castro, who was playing in Dominican Republic in the DR League Winter Leagues before he got injured? I expect him to maybe establish more of a utility role and get comfortable with it, with everything that's going on. Yooper, I don't know about you, but what do you think on that one? For Willie, I think he's due for a bounce back year.
Yeah, I am not as down on him as a lot of fans tend to be. He's a switch hitter. When he makes contact, he shows some power on occasion. He could be a guy who, as he matures into his middle 20s, finds a little bit and has a couple of good years in a bench role. I think probably they're going to move on and challenge themselves to find better players for a starting role. But I don't think we've seen the last of Willie Castro. I'd be pretty surprised.
I would be too. So, Noah, thanks so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. And thanks so much for everybody in the chat for contributing questions. We're going to probably, I think last week will be the last show of the year, no doubt, as if anything breaks, what have you, we'll be on to talk about it. But I don't see that happening. With Christmas around the corner, New Year's Eve, I think it's time for us to, next week will be, no doubt, no BS, our official last show until January, until we start season 11. I mean, I just honestly, at this point, I can feel the effects of the burnout. So I've talked about that before, but for sure, next week will be our last show of the year. So Noah, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be talking some actual baseball soon and exchanging more war stories about being co-experts.
Thanks for having me.
All right, no problem. And we'll see you next week, everybody.
Thanks.
All right.